How is everyone? I like that. I like that. You know, it's so great to be back with you all this morning when Reverend Taryn called me and said, "Hey, Gabrielle, you want to come speak again?" I'm like, I thought you would never call me back. And I just kind of want to give y'all some context that I missed y'all, okay? Because when I am here, I get just as much out of y'all than just being up here with you all today, okay? And, you know, the last time I was with you, y'all really leaned into the conversation with me, and I really want to invite you to do that again with me today because, oh, how things have changed since I was last with you all. And while I was optimistic that our nation would stay true to the course of its moral arc and see through the guise of our current autocratic regime, we are now catching a glimpse of just how broken and fearful our country is. Yet the current reality that we're living in is not new to our history. You know, with the rise and fall of political powers often come seasons of upheaval in human decency and respect, resulting in swatches of humanity being attempted to eradicate. The biblical Queen Esther, you know, she did this on behalf with the king of Persia on behalf of the Jewish nation. And translators and our allies are doing it again today on behalf of the trans and gender expansive community. As I'm sure you all are aware by now, over the last 75 days, the current administration has rolled back a number of unprecedented mandates attacking trans and non-binary people, as well as other strategically undervalued demographics, and I've listed just a few of those here. Because of these attacks, much of our country is in a state of despair. And I want to share with you the impact that despair can have on communities, especially those who are strategically undervalued. And it was a couple of months ago that I came across a statement that Brene Brown wrote in response to the November election last year. She writes, "Despair is a claustrophobic feeling. It's the emotion that says nothing will ever change. It's different than anger, sadness, or grief. Despair is twinged with a sense of hopelessness. People who subscribe to power over leadership often weaponize despair. They count on people giving up on themselves, their work, and each other. We look at people with suspicion." That sound familiar? We question the value of our work. We wonder if courage, kindness, and caring for others just simply doesn't matter anymore. Research shows that hope is a powerful antidote to despair, but research also shows that hope is not an emotion. Rather, it's a cognitive behavioral process. It's about having a pathway, a goal, a pathway to achieve that goal, and a sense of agency, or I can do this. Right now, however, the thing that is helping most is microdosing hope. Are y'all relating to this? You know, we may not have access to big hope right now, but we can ask ourselves, how can I support the people around me? How can I, in the maelstrom of my own emotions, stay committed to courage, kindness, and caring for others, regardless of the decisions that others make? Doing the right next thing is hard as ever right now, but sometimes it's all we've got. This morning, this trans prophetess will share with you how you can speak truth to power and advocate for TGX people through heart allyship. In the same way that Esther was called to save a strategically undervalued demographic of humanity from eradication, for such a time as this, we too are being called. I'd like to turn to your neighbor again and say, for such a time as this, I too am being called. Do that, please. Thank you. Now, I want to let you know that if you didn't already know, I just set yourself up to be accountable, okay? I hope you know that. So regardless of where we find ourselves today, I hope that we can ask ourselves, how can I support the people around me? How can I be a part of the solution? But hopefully you know that humanity without the T is no humanity at all. As cisgender ally to the trans and gender expansive community, speaking truth to power means elevating your advocacy from that of an ally. I want to push you a little further than the wonderful story that we heard earlier. I want you to reframe this concept of ally, and I want to invite you to grow a little bit and consider what becoming a heart ally will mean. For me, it means reframing your understanding of allyship from the context of not just what you must do, but who you must become. You must become a heart ally. A heart ally who understands a person's lived experience through that person's lens, not through your own, but through that person's lens. You see, what we have to understand is having head knowledge is not enough to make someone a good ally, but rather it requires us to develop an empathetic heart knowledge of a strategically undervalued person's experience by centering yourself as the one who is being transgressed. That is a heart ally. Now let me give you some skin on the bones, if you will. Recently, I was invited to facilitate a panel conversation at the Center for Civil and Human Rights. And the executive director of the LGBTQ Institute wanted to meet me for lunch to talk about some of the talking points that we wanted to create. We met at a food court in Atlanta. And the moment we sat down at the food court, he had an aha moment. He started looking around at everybody in the food court, and he noticed that they were laughing, they were snickering, they were pointing at me. It was at that moment, his name is Tim West, a good friend of mine, he realized that in order to advocate for me, he had to stand close enough to me to be hit by the same stones that I was getting hit by. Centering yourself as the one being transgressed is making sure that you're standing close enough to people who are getting hit by the stones that you're advocating for. Okay? So what does heart allyship require of us? Well, a heart ally is someone who is aware, someone who is accountable, someone who takes action. An aware heart ally realizes that y'all might not know everything that you need to know. You see, while there are similarities in our humanity, there are also nuances that make each of us unique. Nuances and complexities that make each of us unique. You see, the more intersections that we embody, the greater the potential is in having to navigate more barriers just to exist on an equal playing field. And this is why we must be willing and able to recognize, acknowledge, I went too far. To recognize, okay, I'm missing something. Okay, I'll just read it. Here we go, there we go. I don't know, sorry. Recognize, acknowledge, and own our biases, or if you prefer, unearned advantages, so as not to allow them to manifest into unrealized privilege that can define how we show up for one another. See, when we're able to do this, we are truly able to meet each other where we are. Here's the thing, y'all. The danger with unchecked biases is that they lure us into a false sense of security. They play tricks on our minds by trying to convince us that if the things that are happening around us don't directly impact us, why engage? There's no need to engage in heart allyship. But an aware heart ally remembers what the matriarch of the civil rights movement told us, and that is, struggle is a never-ending process. Freedom is never won. We have to earn it and win it with every generation. Y'all, the reality is that complacency is the enemy of progress and the death of dreams and freedom. And if left unchecked, will ultimately result in leaving strategically undervalued demographics behind. But if we accept the call to action, it allows us to lean into the reality that heart allyship is a journey, not a destination. You see, being a heart ally is a continual journey of learning. It's an intentional act of spiraling upward. I'll just let you know, there's no, I have arrived in heart allyship. No, every day is an invitation for us to center ourselves in the work. For this reason, we have to be committed to take each courageous step without knowing its exact destination. You see, heart allyship doesn't come with a map. Heart allyship, oftentimes the next step, we have to take a courageous step without knowing our exact destination. And oftentimes, that next step will not be revealed until we take a step. You know, when I began my journey of activism over 10 years ago, I had no idea that it would lead me to where I am today. And if I ask each of you that same question, I'm sure that each of you would have a similar response. The journey of heart allyship is similar to the arc of any civil rights movement. It starts with visibility, and then there's pushback, then there's organizing, and if we're fortunate, there's acceptance and progress. And then there's wash, rinse, repeat all over again. Where we are today is not necessarily a new moment. It's just another moment that we are being invited to take another courageous step on behalf of our neighbor. Understanding this, we can embrace this moment as a moment that's happening for us and not to us. And we can then become an accountable heart ally. An accountable heart ally who is willing to get comfortable being uncomfortable in the spirit of learning to do and be better. Now, folks, this is the pinch point in heart allyship, because the reality is that there are some well-meaning advocates who walk away in defeat in this moment. It's in this space where the fear of making a mistake can be either a detriment to your growth or an invitation to your greatness. Let's face it, y'all, the trans and non-binary community, our complexities, how we show up in humanity as a diverse cross-section of the human family continues to evolve. Our language has and continues to evolve. And sometimes, and I'll say this as a trans person, sometimes to keep up with this, it can feel overwhelming and never-ending. And this is when we have to be willing, y'all, to sit down across the table from one another and get to know one another. As Maya Angelou reminded us, when we know better, we do better. But we're not going to have a chance of knowing to do better if we aren't willing to lean into these stretching and growing moments with curiosity. Curiosity that opens up our mind and heart to consider things that are new and different. As we do this, and we can do this without fear or trepidation, because we know that the sandbox that we all live in, it's more than big enough for us to coexist together respectfully and civilly. In civility, excuse me. We know that differences are not to be feared. Y'all, you know my lived experience as a trans woman takes nothing away from your experience. I do not invalidate your experience any more so than you invalidate me. This is just who we are. We're human beings. You know, I'm reminded of the quote from Audre Lorde. It's not our differences that divide us. It's our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate these differences. But let's just say sometimes, you know, that we may have these feelings of fear or mistrust or even uncertainty. They may come up. Well, when they do, we can then evaluate these feelings from the perspective of, what is this saying about me? Now, y'all, I feel like this is why we are living in our divisive us and them culture, because oftentimes when we encounter a person or a situation that pushes back on our understanding of humanity from our lived experience or understanding of our beliefs, our first reaction is to project, you know, okay, this can't be because this is different. This is wrong based on what I've known from my experience, right? But this is an invitation for us to, when we get into those situations, to step back and say, what is it about this situation? What is it about this person that's bringing up this response in me? And start there. When we start there, then how we approach people, how to approach the situation, it has a completely different outcome. So I hope that we can start looking at things that way, because when we do that work, we can then recognize that resistance is often a reflection of a person's own growing edges, unaddressed fears, and even lack of experiential understanding. When we understand this, we realize that we can then become a teacher to the student or an executioner to the bully. And this is when it gets dicey, y'all, because not everybody is ready to become a student, although I believe everyone has the capacity to be one. This is when we have to decide, is it more important to be right, or is it more important to do the right thing? For those who are not ready, an accountable heart ally knows that how you respond to a situation is reflected, or resistance is not only determines the outcome of the person or the demographic that you're advocating for, but it also establishes society's perception and opinion and even subsequent experience of the person or the community that you're advocating for. How we respond either advances that person's success and that of their community, or it becomes a detriment to their well-being, and it perpetuates the very thing that we're fighting and longing for. It's then we remember what Brene admonished us to do, and that is to confront resistance with courage, kindness, and grace. And I have to confess, y'all, this is hard, especially when conversations and confrontations get volatile and personal. This is when we have to recognize the situation for what it is. Step back, take a breath, and understand that this person may not be ready to become a student. It's then we have to do the right thing and don't engage, don't lash out, don't throw them under the bus. You simply disengage and graciously send them on their way, hoping that somewhere down their path, another person, a touch will take place, and they will be willing to lean in and learn. But for those who are willing to lean in and learn, invite them to come close and listen with ears to hear, eyes to see, hearts to understand, and hopefully feet to take action. In Braving the Wilderness, Brene Brown tells us, people are hard to hate up close. Move in. Speak truth to everything that's happening around us right now, y'all. Be civil. Hold hands with strangers. I've added a couple of verbs here. Maintain a strong back. Approach with a soft front, but lead with a wild heart. Leading with a wild heart means that An active means that you can become an active heart ally. And this means that you're leading with the 3 C's, starting with courage. Y'all, advocacy is messy, and that's why courage is imperative to becoming an active heart ally. It's unreasonable to think that heart allyship is anything but messy, because when you're standing next to the person advocating for someone who has a target on their back, by virtue of you standing next to them, speaking up and out for them, you assume that same target on your back, okay? Courage is necessary for this journey. An active heart ally also understands to lead with the 2nd C, and that is with clarity. They understand that leading with clarity means avoiding positions of ambiguity, because they know that ambiguity is even more dangerous than taking a side. We're seeing the impact that ambiguity is having on the LGBTQ plus community right now with organizations like Bud Light, Disney, Target, and so many organizations reneging on their commitments to DEI. We're even beginning to see the ripple effect of this ambiguity by employees standing up to their employers and saying, no more. I would rather go and work somewhere else where I can be my authentic self without fear or trepidation, and I'll be respected and honored for the value that I bring to this organization. But there are also pride organizations. There are also grassroots LGBTQ organizations who are also saying no more. They're saying, you know, if you cannot stand with us when it gets hard, we're not wanting your money or presence, and it's no longer welcome here. You cannot start bowing out when things get easy. You got to stand with us. Ambiguity is not only a pitfall for organizations to be mindful of, though. It's also something that heart allies need to be aware of as well. You see, we have to understand is that we are all connected. And I know you all know this. This is a teaching, this base is foundational here. We have to understand that how we show up for one another determines our own experiences. We're seeing this play out in real time before our eyes here in this country. But I'm reminded of another Audre Lorde quote. She says, "Your silence will not protect you." Now, I want you to contemplate this quote from the perspective of heart allyship. I want to invite you to go a little further than its face value and read between the lines with me this morning. You see, while this quote is not only written in the context of the person advocating for themselves, it is also inviting us to consider a bigger picture. And that bigger picture is that your silence on matters that are personal to me will eventually trickle down and become personal to you. Understanding the reality of how I show up for others ultimately determines my own safety and well-being. Heart allies also know to lead with the 3rd C, and that 3rd C is conviction. Conviction, knowing that when you speak out and up for others, there will inevitably be resistance. This is where heart allyship must be in check with your personal values. Y'all, the only way that I, as a trans person, can show up in our country right now, a country that is attempting to eradicate me and others like me, is to stand true in my integrity and to not waver from my right to exist. As a active heart ally, leading with conviction will require you to show up with a similar resolve. But the beautiful thing about our collective resolve is, as Martin Luther King Jr. reminds us, the arc of the moral universe is always bent toward justice. Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Atlanta, we find ourselves in the midst of such a moral arc at this very moment. And while we are immersed in uncertainty and human discord, for such a time as this, for us to become an active, accountable, and aware heart ally. Despite everything that's going on around us, we are living in one of the most exciting times because we have an opportunity to make history again. But in order for us to do this, we have to understand that we all have to be a part of the solution. It takes all of us showing up for one another. So my call to action to you this morning is, how will you respond in this moment? What are you planning to do when you walk out of here from the perspective of a heart ally? For such a time as this, for all of us to become heart allies. And so it is. Thank you.